All right, welcome everybody to my presentation, Code, Calm and Control, Stoicism in Software Engineering. My name is Vito Minheere. I'm a freelance platform DevOps engineer. I've been in IT for maybe like over 10 years, also with education, started out in network administration, did all kinds of roles. And somewhere in 2017, I did an internship in Spain. I traveled by train to that location. And on the train, I started reading books, started reading some self-help books, and somehow I managed to stumble upon a book about Stoicism. And I've, embodied or lived the Stoic way ever since. And when I started mentoring junior developers, some things happened at the company we worked at, like features got scrapped, projects got scrapped. It was quite hectic. And I noticed that they were saying like, oh, but we expected you to respond in a certain way to this situation, but you responded completely different than what we would expect. And then I thought, oh, maybe this Stoicism thing is something. And when I was submitting presentations for this Build Stuff edition, I first thought about doing a talk about writing Stoic code, if that would be something. But then I figured out if I were going to talk about Stoic code, I would first need to explain what Stoicism is. And then that could be a way better talk. So I will explain a bit about what Stoicism is, how we can use it, and how it relates to software engineering, just to make the mindset shift a bit easier with concepts you probably already know. So here's what I'm going to talk about today, is the Modern Developer Challenge. There will be no AI in this talk, so that's maybe like refreshing for this time. There are some AI images, for which I apologize, but I canceled my Adobe subscription and I had credits to spend, so I had to use them somehow. Right, so we go to the Modern Developer Challenge. Then, why did I pick Stoicism, an ancient philosophy? It's over 2,300 years old, so what can we learn from that? Well, that's the next part, learning from the Stoics. There are some famous Stoics which wrote most of the work of Stoicism, so I'll dive a bit into that. Then the core principles that ties it together, and then I'll give you some actionable points and practical takeaways for Stoicism, and we'll end with a quick reflection about what I talked about. Well, the Modern Developers Challenge, well, that's no strange thing that it's quite hectic today. So we have, of course, AI. Either it's a threat, it could take your job, it could change your job, but it's also a bubble. It could disappear maybe tomorrow or next month or next year, and all our Copilot solutions could be taken down. What are we going to do then? Another thing is, of course, rapid tool switching, either switching from frameworks, switching from tools like Claude, Cursor, Copilot, GPT. We get new tools every day which either are wrappers of GPT or something else. But it adds up. There's so much. If I'm in the cloud native space, well, if I would put it on the screen, it's full of tools and frameworks. It's a lot. We have security threats. We have the common vulnerabilities and exposures, the CVEs. Or if anyone is doing React JavaScript on a server, there was a new CVE. Well, this happened last night, which is like remote code execution. So those people should be scared as well. Security attacks, breaches, people's identification, all information being exposed, those things are a threat as well. And of course, fast iteration as well. I guess most people are working in an agile and scrum way, so we are kind of running every 2 weeks. Sometimes stuff fails, we have to catch up, you have all the meetings, it's all adding up. So what is the basis of all this, and how does it tie in to Stoicism? Well, you can see us as, the developer in the perfect storm. We are on the ship, we have all kinds of tools around us, everything is happening, but we have to remember that it's us in the boat, and all these things are outside of us. And that's a point I will get back into. All these things are outside of your control. You can't really control it, but you have to deal with it. And dealing with it is the hard part. So we start out with a full battery, and then we get hit by all those waves. So we start getting mental fatigue, start getting tired, and it starts leading into decision paralysis. You might say, oh, decisions, I don't make that many decisions. But if you get out of bed, you have to decide what's your breakfast, what clothes are you going to wear. You have to decide, oh, which feature I'm going to work on, how I'm going to tackle this. The worst decision of all, how I'm going to name this variable. Those things add up as well, and they will drain your battery, which will lead to a lower quality of work. Perhaps something goes wrong, and you have a poor reaction during one of those incidents, or someone else has a poor reaction, and it reflects back on you. And then in the end, your battery is drained, and you could run into burnout, something which is, well, happening quite a lot in our industry and just the world in general. But we have to remember that these are outside pressures. And we are this squeamish banana. Somehow it got into PowerPoint and I could add this icon. But we are this banana, or we could see ourselves as this banana, and we have a bubble of control. So what is in our control and what is outside of our control. So deadlines, reviews from others, maybe they are a bit critical of us, we see that critique as an attack, but it's coming from the outside. Tickets, and then just the pressure of having delivering things, and also the expectations of others, but maybe also inside the bubble, the expectations of ourselves. And yeah, this pressure weighs and it causes an internal struggle. And even though I said we have lots of frameworks, perhaps we need a new framework, but instead of a technical framework, we need a framework for the mind. So Stoicism is such a framework, and it's quite a simple framework, as it's 2,300 years old. And the basis of it, and it's almost like 1/3 of the whole thing, is this: we don't control what happens to us in life, but we control how we respond to what happens. So all the things I mentioned before are things that happen to us, right? The critique we could get, the pressure we get, that happens to us, but we control how we respond to that. We can take that critique and let it reflect on us internally and feel bad about ourselves, or we can take that critique and just take the part that's useful and say, okay, what can I do about this? How can I handle this? And how can this make me better? So why would I look into an Asian philosophy, and why would you be interested in an Asian philosophy? I mean, if you open up Amazon or another bookstore, there are thousands or hundreds of thousands of self-help books that are more modern, more up-to-date. But why would we pick this one? Well, for me, it's a simple philosophy. It was thought of by one person, and then it spread out over the ancient Greek and Rome. There wasn't that much in that world happening, so it's based on just themselves. They didn't have all these tools, they didn't have gurus, they didn't have courses. Well, they did preach about and they have some followers, but there was just the thing they talked about and written down, and yeah, that's it. The next part is the public domain wisdom. Because it's so old, there is no intellectual property anymore, there's no DRM. I can just put in quotes. Anyone can take the quotes and just use them. No one is going to sue you or chase you or say, hey, this is my idea, you stole it. There are some people who make a living off of repurposing those quotes, writing books about Stoicism. That's something you could do, but in the end, the basis of Stoicism is a couple of books and a couple of people. So it's quite easy to grasp, and you don't have to look at it for years and study it. And the next part is, even though it's old, it's been tested by time. So it started out 2,300 years ago, then it popped up a little bit later in the Roman Empire, then it died down, and then in history, sometimes it came back, and people have been using it. And one more recent, well, it's from the 1970s, a more recent example I'll show later on. So why could it still be relevant today? Well, the IT world is quite hectic. There's lots of pressures outside, and we want to go from like this, the room of chaos and the data center of chaos. We don't want panic in the data center. We want to be the Stoic in the data center and just have complete calm and control while things are going on. And the more recent example I'd like to talk about is James Stockdale. He was a pilot in the Vietnam War on the American side, and he was shot down above Vietnam. So he was crashing down, and in his memoir, Courage Under Fire, he wrote that he thought about this: I am leaving the world of technology and entering the world of Epictetus. And Epictetus is a famous Stoic person. So why would he, an American person, probably a Christian, I'm assuming, but they have all these mental models. Why would he pick a mental model from over 2,000 years ago and then apply that while he's entering the worst phase of his life, as he was imprisoned for 7 years by the Viet Cong and was tortured for a long time as well? But he used Stoicism to remain sane and to keep his wits about and to not let the imprisoners win him over or just capture him. They captured his body, but not his spirit, so to say. So we can take a look at the famous Stoics. Of course, one is Epictetus. So the three most famous ones who kind of wrote the famous words are then Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius is really like the biggest name in there of the most famous Stoic. So perhaps some of you might have recognized that name somewhere. Well, we'll start out with Epictetus. Epictetus started out his life as so he started out his life as a slave. Of the three people, he had like the worst life. He started out as a slave. He was also lame, not in the way that he was boring, but one of his legs didn't work, so maybe not even a good working slave. But in his life, he was allowed to follow the study of others who were preaching about Stoicism, and then he internalized that and used that to survive his slave stage and later became a freed man. And one of his quotes that I really like is that it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And Epictetus was also one of the Stoa who really embodied the lifestyle. Instead of just preaching about it, people could really follow him and see, oh, this is how, if you approach Stoicism, this is what could happen to you. And he wrote a book, well, they all wrote books. His book was entitled The Enchiridion. So this is just to, if you would like to learn more about it and you see the word Enchiridion somewhere and Epictetus, you would think, oh, that's his book. That's his really good part. What I really like about the Epictetus style is it's more written for himself and not per se for others. So it's more of his own mental models, how he could use it. And one of his favorite examples is if you have a favorite cup. So you would say at home, I have a favorite cup to drink my tea or coffee from. You would have to tell yourself it's a cup you are fond of, not this particular cup, because you could break that cup and you would then be sad. But that is something which you don't want to happen to you. So you would then say, I am not fond of this cup in particular, but I am fond of cups. So if you would break your favorite one, you would have still other cups as well. So that would not break your tranquility, which is like your baseline. Another thing about the cups Epictetus told in his books was that if you would break your cup, you could be pissed about it. You could be angry and say, oh no, my favorite cup, and have a sad day about it. But if you would see someone else break his cup, you would say, oh, it's only a cup. Why are you so angry about that? But that reaction to that event happening is something you would also need to embrace yourself. So if you would break your cup, it's not correct to say that the other person can't be angry, but you can be angry. You should also see yourself as that other person and say, oh, it is just a cup. These things happen. Yep. Going back, so the three ones. So we have the, kind of worst life, the slave, and then we have Seneca in the middle. And Seneca was a quite rich and powerful man, deeply involved in politics. And he was also a wealthy senator and advisor to Nero. And he was one of the first, what we now would call investment bankers. So he handled quite large things. So he had a way better life than Epictetus. Although I think he also got exiled, which is something which apparently happened quite often in that time, that the powers in the city would say, oh, you Stoics are not good for our control, so you are exiled from our city, you have to live somewhere else. And Seneca is famous for his quotation saying, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And Seneca wrote the book Letters from a Stoic. So instead of Epictetus, who wrote more for himself, Seneca was, he was an advisor, so he wrote letters to someone else. He was advising other people, saying, "Oh, this is how you could approach your situation, how you could do these things." And let me see if I have a quote from him. Well, there's enough quotes in there. And then we have the last person. If we go back to all those slides. So we started out as a slave, then we have like a trader, a large businessman. Marcus Aurelius is on the right side. How could he improve over Seneca? Oh, Marcus Aurelius was the emperor of Rome. And he started out, he was mentored into Stoicism. So it was something his mentor that then mentored him into being the emperor of Rome, taught him Stoicism and helped him control all the power that he had over the citizens of Rome and even over the world. He would say, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." So this was a man who had all the power in the world. He could have whatever he wanted, and he knew that as well. And he knew that if he let that get to his head, it would be bad for the people of Rome. So one of the parts of Stoicism is also that you have a kind of, you have to be useful for other people as well. You have to be kind to other people. And he would know that if he wouldn't do that, it would be a mess. And he also wrote the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. But this is more like his personal journal that wasn't meant to be published, but people found it and published it anyway. So it's all really focused on his life as an emperor, and how you could go to your day-to-day work. He has some really great examples of if you go about your day, you would meet annoying people. So you could be prepared that, well, someone will annoy you eventually somehow, or you might even annoy someone else. And then instead of being angry about that and say, "Oh, what an annoying person, why would they be like this?" you could just make a mental note and say, "Oh, I have encountered one. I have encountered one of these annoying people." And then just keep that in mind and let it go and go on with your day. So they really try to establish a baseline, the tranquility, and try to internalize everything so that nothing outside of yourself could cause imbalance in that. Back to this slide. So we have three completely different people, Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius, who all lived a Stoic life. So what tied these three people together? What are the virtues of Stoicism? So there are 5 virtues. Some of the cool AI images I really worked hard to prompt. These are 5 pillars, and one of the virtues is wisdom. Well, that's something quite easy to explain. If you are here at this conference, you are searching for wisdom. And a good quote by Epictetus is, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." You have to keep an open mind and really take in what someone is telling about and look from it from all sides. Is this useful? Is this something I could use? Is this something that maybe helps me with something else? You have to keep an open mind. And wisdom is what the Stoa and the people in that era were really looking for. The next one is courage. And it's not more like when you're being scared, but it's more courage to live in a way to keep your tranquility alive. So we suffer more often in imagination than in reality, which was a quote to Seneca, is that you have to, it can be scary if you think about the future, about all the bad things that could happen, but it's often in your imagination that you suffer, but you do need the courage to keep on going on and working towards that future that might be scary. The next virtue is discipline. So this could be, you could think of discipline as going out to the gym early in the morning, but it's also the discipline of being righteous. And Marcus Aurelius really there's a good quote for that. If it's not right, don't do it, and if it's not true, don't say it. So I learned about Stoicism, and I tried to embody it in my work. I remember once I had to lie to a client about our status update and how far along we were. And afterwards, I really felt bad about myself. So after that, I could really, I didn't want to do that again. So I could really embody the, if it's not right, if it's not true, don't say it. So I told myself, and I also told the managers, like, I won't do this anymore. So I'll just tell them how it is, even though it is bad. And we could also see that, say that discipline is shipping work you're proud of, instead of just cutting corners you'll pay for in the next incident or even the next quarter by creating more technical debt. Yes, and the next one is justice. So you could see this not as justice in the way of law or social justice. It's more being just, a just person. And the quote, "A man who makes a decision without listening to both sides is unjust, even if his ruling is a fair one." You could see this if you would get a legacy project. You look at the code and you would say, oh, this is incorrect, this is wrong, why did they do it this way? But there probably is a reason for why they did it this way. So you need to look at both sides. You look at your opinion, but also the reason why someone else did it, and then balance those two and then make a decision. So you could maybe come to the same conclusion, but it would not be just to do that without looking at it from both sides. So justice is treating your teammates fairly, reviewing code to help, not to score points. I mean, someone could make a mistake, that happens, you treat them fairly. So those are 4 things that the Stoa all had in common. This is what they kind of embodied. So they could strive for the 5th virtue, which is eudaimonia, which is not really a word you would encounter, but if you would translate it, it would mean to live a good life, which is the thing they really sought after. That is the goal of Stoicism, to say at the end, you have lived a good life. So a great man is one who is in harmony with himself, is eventually, you wouldn't get outside forces, but you control how you react to it. So you are the one, in the end, who decides how you feel about certain things and how you live your life. And the word eudaimonia is then brought up by 3 things. So it's the quality, the excellence in character. We have the daemon part, so that's the connection to one's inner guide. So that's your internal self. That's the real person that is important in your life. And we have the ia, which is the ongoing state. So it's not really a destination you reach. It's not like the nirvana or you are Zen now. It's something which is ongoing and which you also have to keep in mind, that you need to be really actively doing these Stoicism things to keep it under control. And also in his books, Marcus Aurelius said that he often fails these things and then gets his tranquility trampled and he gets angry about something. But that is also another thing you could react to. That happens. The next day is a new day, so you can start over again, and that will make your tranquility better again. So that's the end goal. That ties the 3 Stoa together from the different ways of life, is they all try to reach eudaimonia, which was a concept of living in balance with nature, by the original Stoic, so that went on for generations. And a man is as unhappy as he has convinced himself he is. So that is, you have to convince yourself that you can reach this, and you have to react to all the things that are coming in, or even popping up in your own mind. So this is all very, maybe technical, very not really hands-on. So how would you even get to these virtues? How would you get to eudaimonia? And that is where Stoicism really shines. So they really thought about these things, and they made some mental techniques. So it's nice, you don't need any extra books. You could read about them. There's probably web pages that have all the techniques listed, and you can get some examples from that. And that's all you need, really. You don't need any ongoing lessons or certifications even. So I will show you some of the things you can do, the disciplines in Stoicism. And the first part, and the biggest part, is referring back to the quote I showed in the beginning, is the dichotomy of control. So we should always be asking ourselves, is this something that is or is not in my control? No person has the power to have everything they want, but it's in their power not to want what they don't have and to cheerfully put to good use what they do have. So you could say, oh, I want a Ferrari, but if you never reach that Ferrari, you would be forever unhappy. While if you could be happy with the car you already have, then you wouldn't have to strive for that happiness, and you could be happy in the right moment. So the dichotomy is, of course, is two things. There are things that are in your control and things that are not in your control. Well, the things that are not in your control, the biggest example they give is whether the sun rises tomorrow. Right? You have no influence if the sun rises tomorrow. There's nothing you can do to make it happen or even not make it happen. So that is something you should not worry about. What is in your control are, of course, your thoughts, your actions, your desires. Well, relating to software engineering, code quality is in your control, while the project success is not in your control. You could influence it, of course, by the things that are in your control, such as code quality, but yeah, you working on the project does not guarantee project success, so you shouldn't be too focused on that part. Another thing that's not in your control is your colleagues' behaviors. So they could be stressed out, they could be close to a burnout, and they could be angry with you about something you did or maybe did not do. You cannot control that, but you control your behavior either under their reaction or on the whole situation, and not letting it get to your head and getting angry on other people. So, well, there's the book that I read is not one of the older books that I mentioned, but it's a newer book. It's called A Guide to the Good Life, which is a modern take on Stoicism. And the author argumented that the dichotomy of control is a bit too simple. It's much of a simplification. You could put a lot of things and say, oh, it's not in my control, I should not worry about it, I don't care, I only focus on what is in my control. But even though you could say project success is not in your control, it is still something you could influence. So the author says it should not be the dichotomy of control, it should more be the trichotomy of control. So of course you have on the part things that are in your control, things that are not in your control, and then things you have some control over. And a good example for this is, let's imagine you're playing a game of tennis. So your goal, or the goal should be to win the game of tennis, right? But winning the game of tennis is not in your control, because there are outside influencers. Of course, there's an opponent. The opponent's goal is probably also to win the game, and two people can't win the game, so someone has to lose. So this would upset your tranquility and would not help you reach eudaimonia. However is in your control is how you play the game. If you make every serve you play the best to your abilities, that is something you can influence, and that could influence the end result of the game. So you have some control over that, and you have, of course, what is in your control is being active in the game, practicing for that game, and making sure that every action you take in that game is the best action you could do. So also in a project, you could not have control over the end result, but you have influence over that project, and by doing things in a good way, you can make sure that it ends in a good way. And what better way to complete the feature than to do that to the best of your abilities? So you should internalize that part and then focus on what you can control, so that hopefully influences what you maybe cannot control. Another mental technique from the Stoa is preparing for failure, which is done by negative visualization, which I'll explain in a bit. So perhaps people are known with the postmortem. So you finish a project and then you look back, oh, what went wrong? How could we have done that better? But in a pre-mortem, you would look at the start of a project, act as if you are at the end of the project, and then you could say, well, it failed, the project failed, how did it fail? What could we do to prevent this? And what can we learn from that? So when we start the project, we can do something about that. And then some of the quotes they had is, besides contemplating that bad things will happen to us, we should try to